I will welcome you. This is our September meeting of Access Lunchtime. My name is Maria Barnes, and I am the chapter president. And our presenter today are going to be Crystal Long and Adrian Bell, and they are going to be talking about using custom and built-in functions in expressions, mainly in Access, I assume, although maybe in a wider context in some cases for VBA. A little bit about our speakers. You may have seen Crystal on several forums. She goes by Strive4 with the number piece, and she's been both using and teaching Access a long time. She maintains the website MsgBox.com, and there you'll find lots of free code, tools to download, videos to watch, and articles to read. And she has been an MVP in Access almost continually since 2006. And then her co-speaker, Adrian Bell, sometimes goes by the nickname Neopa. Did I pronounce that right? Neop, capital P, A, which originated back in his gaming days in an earlier lifetime. He's been an MVP in Access almost continually since 2014, and most of his credits are due to his work on Bytes.com, where you will see him posting as Neopa. He's worked in IT, covering coding, app design, system support, and pretty much everything else since he started working back in 1978. All right, Crystal, are you ready to take it over?
I am ready. Thank
All
you,
right.
Maria.
Go ahead.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Maria. Welcome. Today, we are going to talk about expressions, and I'm going to do an overview of building them and demonstrate expressions in various objects and talk about a function reference that I put together and sharing with you. And then Adrian is going to explain some of the differences between how expressions are processed by Access objects versus VBA. There's a link that you can download the function reference that I'm going to be referring to, and if you've joined us after the link was already in there, Adrian or Maria can put it in again. So first, I'm going to just do a quick overview with slides on where you can use expressions, and then I'll do a demo. So for instance, you can use expressions in a table design. You can't use all of the functions in here, but you can use most of them. And here's just an example. So if you make a calculated field and then you look at the datasheet view, then you'll see the full name is calculated from all the different parts of the name. And that will just be available for you in the table without you having to put expressions in the objects that you make on it. You can use expressions when you validate information in a table. For instance, let's say that you have a table with orders, and you then have a due date. The due date has to be greater than or equal to the order date. That's the rule. It can't be due before it's ordered. And so we can have an expression in a validation rule, and then if the rule is violated, they'll see the validation text. Now, on a field level, the field validation rules can't refer to other fields. It's a rule for itself, such as it has to be greater than or equal to 0, or some date has to be greater than today or less than today. So there's a little bit of a difference on what you can do at what level, of course. You can use expressions for a default value. I like to put a field in all my tables for the date time a record was added, and I just give it a default value of now, which is a function to return the current system date and time, and I don't have to do anything with it. It's automatically filled out. Whether I import records, add them manually, use a form, it doesn't matter how the record gets in there. that default value is going to get stamped for that record. You can also use expressions in data macros. Now, here's where we are somewhat limited. NZ and other functions aren't recognized. So you have to get creative. This is the data macro before the record is saved. If the order date is filled out and the due date is not filled out, then 30 days automatically gets added to the order date to make the due date. Now, why might you want to calculate the due date and save it as opposed to making it a calculated field? Well, you can't change a calculated field, but if you calculate it and save it, then you can always overwrite it with something else. You can use expressions in queries. So for instance, let's say you have a query where you have an amount, when it's due, how many days it's overdue, and that's calculated from today. Actually, I made this data a couple days ago. So the days overdue are listed as of 2 days ago. So this datasheet view is just simply showing the SQL statement that I have here on the right. And I'm using the dateDiff function to calculate the days overdue from today's date. Now, if you want to age those amounts, here's the SQL down there. You can see that we still have the date due, and we went ahead and put the customer on this list as well, and the amount that they're due. And then we have how many days they're overdue, and then we have different columns for whether it's 30 days or 60 days, 90, 120. And as you can see, what I've done down here in the SQL statement is days overdue is calculated in one of the columns. And then the other columns can use that calculated field in the expression for their condition. So if days overdue, that's calculated here in this column. So the due 30, due 60, due 90, the 120 over 120, all of these calculations are going to use this calculated field, and they don't have to repeat the expression to calculate it in this case. Now, if we sum it, let's say that now we just want the bottom line. So up here, oh, I forgot to mention at the bottom here, I did turn on the totals row. Access will add up the total of everything in this column. When you're looking at the datasheet view, there's a totals button on the ribbon, and it either shows or hides this row. And then you can click in each of these cells and choose one of the aggregate function. Obviously, for days overdue, it wouldn't make sense to add all those up. So in this case, 102 is just the average of the number of days overdue. And this is made up data. I imagine in a real company that wouldn't happen. Now let's say all we want is the bottom line. So we don't care about all the detail. We just want to know how much everything adds up to. Now, if you're in the design view of a query and you click on the vertical totals button, see it's vertical here. Let me just go up a screen. See this totals button is horizontal, and that's the datasheet view button, and it does something different than the totals button in the design view, which is vertical. So when you choose the totals button there, and we're going to aggregate now, like we're just going to add everything up, notice that in this case, we have to repeat the dateDiff that we use to calculate how many days it's overdue. Each time this is repeated when we do it this way. So now, let's try using something else. Well, I guess first I'll show you, since I took a screenshot, when you turn on the totals row in the design view, these are your choices. You can group by it, sum it, average it, max, min, count, standard deviation, variance. First, last, it's just an expression. and you could just have it on as a where to limit the criteria. Now notice that the first one is a sum, this amount due. All of these other ones are expressions. I mean, we don't need to group by them. We're just writing an expression for what it is. Now there's another function that I'm wondering, this is kind of interesting. How many of you have heard about the partition function? If you have, put yes in the chat. And if you haven't, put no in the chat. And maybe Maria or Adrian will tell me how many people said yes or no. Because this is kind of really an interesting function. What it does is I was aging by putting an equation in each of those columns. But in this case, with the partition function, what I can do is say, I want to partition, meaning like put into buckets, this days overdue, which is the date diff, the number of days between the due date and the current date, starting with 0, going up to 119 every 30 days. So I have like a 30-day bucket as the age. And then I'm going to show the amount due and who the customer is.
So FYI, Crystal, we had mostly no's, maybe generously a third yeses, but slightly under that probably.
Okay. So this is review for some of you and new for others. So look what it does. So this :-1, this is everybody that's before our range. And then here are our buckets, 0 to 29, 30 to 59, 60 to 89, 90 to 119, and then over 120. Now this first example just shows all the detail. Now the second example, what I did here is I summed them. So now let's say I don't care who owes us money. I just want to know what's 30 days overdue, what's 60 days overdue. So here we've summed it, and you can see the SQL just uses the sum, and now we have totals. So those are some cool ways you can age things. Other places you can use expressions are in conditional formatting. Like for instance, one of my forms, I use a contact form to collect information for companies as well as human beings, but companies don't have a birth date and human beings do. So if is human is not true, then I don't want to show the controls that I use to collect the birth date. So I'm just using an expression here in the conditional formatting. Now the expression builder, which I'm actually going to show you, I just put a slide in here, is really cool. So if you're in a property that you can use the expression builder on, you see the ... off to the right, you can click on that and it launches the expression builder. You can also press Control F2. Now when the expression builder comes up, you'll see a box where you can enter an expression or build an expression. And really important, if you want to make it bigger, which I always do, you can use Control mouse wheel to zoom it up or down. Yeah, I'll go a little bit crazy, zoom it too far up and have to wheel it back down. But that's the expression builder box. And then on the lower part of the window, you'll see on the left-hand side different elements, and then categories for those elements, and then the values on the right. Now the categories, if you picked an element that's like a form, then your categories are going to be the controls on that form. And then once you pick a control, you can get to the different properties of the control, but value is usually what you're after, and that is the default value. Another way you can find out information is with the object browser when you're in VBA. So if you press the F2 key up here at the top, this drop down is what library you want. So like all libraries is the default, or you could pick Access or DAO this is the name of my database, my project name of my database, or VBA, or whatever references you have. So the object browser goes hand in hand with the references, like tools references. Like if I had Excel as a reference, then I'd see Excel in my dropdown and I could explore just what's in Excel. Once you have something clicked on the object browser down at the bottom, you can click on what's underlined and it'll take you to the help for that. Now, Unicode. I'm bringing up Unicode because I'm going to talk about VBA and also Access objects. And Unicode doesn't render in VBA. Now, it can store Unicode in VBA strings, but it can't show it to you properly. And I loved using Unicode in places, not necessarily for data, but I really like using it for format codes, like for checkboxes, to make some really cool checkboxes. You can use flags and all kinds of interesting symbols. I do have a Unicode character map little tool. I didn't put the link in here. I'll have to add it later. That you can download on my website, and it looks like the Windows character map, except it's for Unicode. And so you can browse through here and pick interesting things. Now I'm going to go to a demo. I made this little demo database to just show a couple different things. I have a form here for contacts, and I also made a table to keep track of memo information. I like that name, memo. The long text fields used to be called memo. Now they're called long text, but I still like to call them memo. So this is where I can just write as much as I want about anyone, anytime. But I don't have a form for it yet. And when I pop up this memo form that isn't created yet, I want it to get its default value from this form. So right now, I'm just going to go to the Create ribbon, and I'm just going to make a quickie form. Yes, I know it's ugly. That's okay. We're going to go to the, oh, by the way, the primary key on the contacts form is CID, which stands for Contact ID. Right now, I'm looking at I can't read that, 936 or something like that.
That's correct.
But let's say when I open up this contacts form, let me just go to the design view of this. I want this CID to automatically get filled out with this CID. So how do I do that without really having to figure out the reference myself? Well, I can go into the data and I can go into default value, and I'm going to go over here, click on the builder button. The expression builder comes up, and over here on the left, I'm just going to drill down to what I want. Oh, by the way, I can make this a little bigger. I want information from a control on a form. So I'm going to go to Forms. I'm going to go to the forms that are loaded. I'm going to go to, oh, I've got that loaded twice. I don't know what that is. That doesn't. Oh, that's the temporary name for the form that I'm building. Okay. So on the contacts form, the CID, now I could double click this value, or I can just double click. So you single click to like drill down, then you're like, there, yeah, I want that. So now I'm going to double click on CID, and it puts the reference in here. I'll just say, okay. And now I've got a default value that's going to just automatically get filled out. And I guess I'll save this form. I'll call this, I don't want to call it that. Oh, wait, oops, that's why it's calling it contacts one. Let me copy this reference. Gosh, I built this form on the wrong table. I selected memo, but I'd actually built it on the contacts form because that's what was active. Let's see if I can do a create, or if I have to close that contacts form first. Yeah, had to click on that. Okay, so now we'll just do that again. Design view, go to the CID, and I happen to copy what was in there so we don't have to go get it again. So now it's getting its default value from there, and I'll call this, I'll start this with an F, and then I'll go pop. Actually, these have a C in the preface of them just because they're from contacts. Well, this one isn't, but the other ones are. So now I will just close this form. And now if I click here, I'm on contact ID 32, pop memo. I just simply open this form and it fills out this 32 for the contact ID. Now, if I go to another record, obviously, you know what's going to happen. When I open this, it's automatically going to get that CID. Now, obviously, this is not a very pretty form, but this is really cool thing that you can do, and the expression builder can help you do things. I'll close this. Another thing I want to talk about is reports just a little bit. So I'm going to make a report based on the contact table. And what I generally do before I make a report is I will just make a query based on whatever table or tables, you know, so I'll use a query to kind of line up all my data. Now, in this case, the data is just all coming from the same place. But if it wasn't, you know, I could add other tables. So here, I'm going to go down here and I'm going to get my calculated field, my full name, and I put an underscore is at the end because it's using the is operator to do the calculations as opposed to using the is null function. And I'm going to give this an alias of contact. I'm just going to also get the first letter of this, and I'm pressing Shift F2 to zoom this up. I could use the expression builder, but that'll take a couple more minutes than I want. So I'm just going to say letter. Oops. I'll go first letter. Is going to be left. And then I like to copy the field names and paste them while I'm in here just to save a little time. I'm just going to get the left one character of that. And there we go, the first letter. Now I can also use VBA functions in here. So for instance, I have a VBA function to get the age of somebody, which I'm going to use right now. So this is a custom function that I built. So I'm just going to get the age. I'm keeping track of the date of birth. I'm doing year, month, and day in 3 separate, actually, I think I'll use the expression builder. I got them in 3 separate fields because you may not know somebody's birth date, but you know what month and day their birthday is. So you could fill those parts out of it, even though you might not know the year. So now if I look at this again, forms, I'm going to go to loaded forms. No, tables. You know what? I'm just going to type this in. IIF. And now remember I told you control mouse wheel to make it bigger. IIF DOBYR is not null. Oops. I thought maybe escape would make the little floaty go away. Trying to zoom this up. Now it's not working. Not null. So if all 3 of those things are not null, then I'm going to use the date serial function. Actually, I'll look it up here. I'll go to functions, built-in functions, and I'll go to date time here, and I'll go to date serial, And I'll just double click it. It puts it in. It puts the placeholders in. And so for the year, that's going to be my DOBYR. And the month is going to be my DOB month. And the day is going to be my DOB day. Now, the reason that I want a date is because I'm going to send it to my GetAge function. So I'll just come over here, copy this GetAge function, and right before here, I'll paste that GetAge, open the parenthesis, and close it after that. Now I'm in the middle of a IIF, and so what do I want to do if it's null? I'll put a null. If it's null, I don't want to say I have a value. And okay. Let me Control F2 this again. Now I can get this zooming thing to work. Now what do I want to call this? Oh, we'll just call it age. Okay, so if those things are not null, meaning they have a value, I'm going to use my GetAge function. I'm going to use date serial to actually make a date with those three fields. And okay, and let me just look at the datasheet view. Okay, I'm getting numbers. So now I'm just going to save this. I'll call this Q contacts. Okay, Q contacts. Now that's the data I want on my report. So I'm just going to make a real quickie report here. Create, and I'll go to the report wizard, and I'll move over, I'll pick a different table. Actually, I want to show queries. It starts with a Q. So I'll just type a Q, and there it is, Q contacts. Move over all the fields to show on the contacts. Just go to the next, and I'm going to sort by the first letter, although actually I think I'll do that myself rather than doing it here in the wizard. Go to the next one, and now within that I'm going to end up sorting by contact. Go to next, and I'll pick one of these looks. I'll choose the tabular one. Notice you also have a checkbox in case you want Access to adjust things for you. Next. Now this is the report title, but I don't want the title to be Q contacts. I'll just call this contacts. I'm not sure. We'll find out if this is also the report name. So now we'll just finish, and it shows me this report. I'm just going to rearrange things a little bit here, turn on the grouping and sorting. I'm going to add a group. I'm going to group by the first letter, and then within the first letter, I'll click here on the more, and notice I didn't have to actually define the first letter in the record source in the query, because I could have said, I want to group by contact just the first character. I could have done it that way. Didn't do it that way. Okay, now with no totals, okay, with a title, all right, with the header section, without a header section, okay, and where's the footer? Oh, I want a footer with a footer section, and now I'm going to add a sort. Well, actually, there is a sort. That's the first thing. I'm going to take this grabby thing and move the sort after the group. So I'll group on the first letter. Now I'll just move this first letter up to the grouping thing here, and actually I'm going to get rid of that as well. Move these ages over, and in the first letter footer I'm just going to create a calculated field. So go here to design, text box control, put it here, and the control source equals count and asterisk. Just put count. Normally I'd take a little more time, format these things and whatnot. I'm also going to add a report footer. So let's see, report, let's see, where is it? Okay, report, here it is. I want to add a report footer. Oh, it's already showing. No. Okay, it just wasn't any big. Now notice, and this, if I copy this and put it in the report footer, it's not going to be the same value. So here I'm going to put count letter. And I'll just tighten things up a little bit. Do that. Oops, didn't mean to put that back. Control Z, Control Z. I think on the format, I'll just make sure top is 0. Okay, it is. Scoot this up. First letter count. Make sure the tops of these are 0. Scoot this up. I don't really care for that stuff at the footer. I mean, it's nice to put a page footer on, but I really don't need to use it right now. Report header. What's in the report header is what I usually put in the page header. That's kind of the title. I don't ever make it that big, but a report header is more like for a cover page. So now I will save this and do a preview. So I have 13 friends whose last name begins with the letter A. Each time there's a letter, you'll see that it's just counting that letter. And now I'll go to the end of the report, and I have 160 friends in total. So you can see that depending on where you are, the expression evaluates differently. Now I've gone through a lot of places where you can use expressions. Now I'd like to kind of dig in a little bit to the functions and the different behaviors of them. Now, just to kind of help with the functions, I'm going to show you a little bit about this function reference that I put together. For instance, you can use the MsgBox function, and I'm just going to I'm going to search for MsgBox. And most of the time, you don't need to handle a return value. You just say MsgBox and then my message, hello world, and the user clicks, okay, I saw that message. However, if you want to, in addition to the prompt, which you give it, you can also choose which buttons you want to show. Okay and cancel, yes, no, cancel. Which buttons do you want? Do you want like a critical button? You can specify a title for the message box. And you can also specify help file and context, which I never do, but I usually do specify these 3 things. Now, if you surround the arguments with a parenthesis, that parentheses, since there's 2 of them, that means that you intend to handle a return value. What is the type of that return value? It's an integer. Now, what if I actually want to know more about MsgBox? I can click on MsgBox here, and it takes me to the Microsoft help for the MsgBox function. So all of these are functions that are defined by VBA. Now notice there are some things missing, like where is NZ? Shouldn't that come between these 2 things? Well, NZ is not actually defined by VBA. It's defined by Access, and VBA also just gets to use it. Another thing that's also defined by Access, and in this case it also is defined by VBA, is IIF. So a lot of us use this if some condition. What do you want to show if it's true? What do you want to show if it's false? Now in VBA, both the true part and the false part are evaluated. So you can't divide by 0 or do anything that would cause an error. However, if your IIF function is being used in a query or an access object, like a control source or something like that, guess what? IIF behaves like it's supposed to, or like somebody would think it would. You evaluate the condition. If it's true, then you only evaluate the true part. And that's the way that Access objects work. The differences between IIF is what brought attention to the need to dive in a little bit into the different behaviors. As IIF behaves differently, and there's actually a lot more differences. I mentioned Unicode. Logical bitwise operators such as and or work in VBA, but they don't work in queries or object expressions. It treats the word like most of you actually use it, but people like Adrian actually use it as a bitwise operator. There are certain things you can do in Access objects that you can't do in VBA, such as use the in and between operators. You can use is in VBA, but it doesn't behave the same as it does in Access objects. Like works in both of them. NZ, as I mentioned, is part of the Access library. So if you're in Excel and you just really love how Access gets to have NZ, guess what? You can reference the Access object library, and then you can use it in Excel too. Back to kind of the differences between VBA and the Access objects. Adrian is going to explain the hows and whys of the differences between how the expressions are processed by Access objects versus VBA. And before I send it off to Adrian, I'm just going to show this last slide in my PowerPoint deck because it's about Colin's presentation next month. If you want to jump in real quick, Maria, or Colin, if you're here too, hope you'll join us next month with a masterclass in Access Security by the brilliant Colin Riddington, Tuesday, the 28th of October, 2025. And as Colin pointed out right before the meeting, the Brits will have already rolled back from summertime. So normally, like today, you're here at 6 p.m. your time starting, but next month for you guys, just in the UK, it's still the same time for us. It's going to be 5 o'clock p.m.
Not just in UK, but in Europe in general, they all switch a week earlier than us. The UK is just an example. Do we want to go ahead and allow either Colin or I think it's Marcus to
why
give
don't
a
you
brief blurb here about this at this time?
Yes. And then I'm going to turn the video over to Adrian.
Okay, so go ahead and whichever one of you wants to unmute, go ahead.
I'll be really quick just to say that the titles are way bit over the top, masterclass in Access Security, because as you all know, Access isn't very secure. So it's to make it as secure as possible. I'm going to show you various techniques, some of which you'll know, some may be new to you. And Marcus is here tomorrow for Access Europe. So at some suitable point, can he just talk about his meeting tomorrow?
When do you want him to do that, Crystal and Adrian?
I'd prefer to finish this off first,
okay,
and then have
we'll
him
let him do that at the end. All right, sounds good. So Adrian, go ahead and take away your part.
Thank you. I'd just like to say, from my experience and my knowledge of things, that actually, even though Colin might not consider it a masterclass, it is. He's very well up on security and access, including the fact that these limitations.
And now, the expressive and impressive Adrian Bell will enlighten you with his vast wisdom. Welcome, Adrian.
Marvellous. Thank you, Crystal. Now, I've been given a couple of things to go through. Let's start with IIF and why it apparently behaves differently in expressions compared to within VBA. Actually, I won't start with that. I will start first off by making a point. Making it clear, VBA is often referred to. VBA is actually a semi-compiled language environment. And you have VBA code, etc., and that's fine. But there's also a library called the VBA library. And often we hear people referring to what's done in VBA when it's talking about the VBA library, like Crystal's list of procedures, for instance. They're in the VBA library. They're not written in VBA. Okay, so just to make that clear. IIF, why is it that that behaves differently within VBA code compared to within an expression? There is an engine called the expression service. The expression service, you'll notice a similarity and a big overlap between the expression service and Jet/Ace SQL. That's because one provides the other. I'm not sure exactly which way. I think the expression service provides what you get in SQL, as well as certain things others, because as you've seen in there are various objects you can set up, queries, forms, etc. All can use expressions. They all use the expression service. And even in VBA, if you say eval or evaluate, that will also use the expression service. So that is why there are certain things you can evaluate, which the expression service recognizes, but other things that you can't. You can't evaluate things which are exclusively VBA. Can't think of any off the top of my head. So there's a difference there. In the expression service and in SQL, GetAge SQL, the IIF is not a function. It is a bit of the syntax. It is a supported syntax. Like between, like in, it's part of the syntax. So when it comes to it, the expression service evaluates the first thing because it's part of the syntax of the expression. It will then choose which of the other two options to evaluate as it progresses. VBA doesn't do that. VBA treats it like a procedure. And with every procedure that VBA runs, what it does is before it even calls the procedure, because IIF never crashed anything. Divide by zero error in IIF has never been a problem because it never sees it. The different parameters passed to IIF are evaluated and prepared before IIF is called. And it's then that it crashes. So VBA is processing through, it's trying to evaluate, and it says, I can't deal with this. It's divided by zero, I've crashed. So obviously it doesn't crash the whole computer, it handles it and gives you an error. But it's not an error in the IIF function. It's the error in preparing the parameter. Okay, so that's one of the first things. There was another thing Crystal mentioned, bitwise logical expressions. Now for this, I will share my screen a second because I've got an example. And what you see in front of you, and tell me if you don't, is two simple expressions. I'm looking for this. Come on, make that wider, make that wider. Right, I presume you can all see that. Now I am going to say one is x, 8 and 4. Now 8 and 4 is a logical expression, and that means that the 8-bit, so bit 2, is set and bit 1 is set of the other. When they get ANDed in VBA, if you were to do this in VBA, the result would be 0 or false because neither bit overlaps any bit from the other value. Okay? However, in the expression service, it automatically converts every value that it sees into a Boolean when it sees an AND or an OR. Basically, a logical operator, and or blah-de-blah. If it sees those, it will both sides, before and after, convert them first to Boolean. Okay, so in this case, what we see is true and true. And when I run that, if I can manage to do this SQL, you'll see that both the X and the Y come as true. That's all ones, basically, -1. just to show this, I've got the same thing. If you can see it down here, I'll make it, hopefully it's big enough. Ignore all the rubbish up there. I'm only looking at this here. If I say, what is 8 and 4, it'll do what I suggested earlier. It will take the 8 and the 4, it'll overlap them, see that there are no bits in either side which match the other, and it will give a result of 0. Okay, so that's one of the things to understand. Now, I want to go through all the things. Now, there is certain SQL syntax which is available in the expression service, but is not available in VBA. Crystal mentioned this. In and between are both keywords in SQL, and therefore the expression service will manage them. Okay, like is also, it's really a thing from SQL originally, although I don't absolutely know that, but you'll notice, if you don't already know, like is also supported in VBA. So you can do a wildcard comparison in VBA and it'll work normally. Otherwise, that's pretty much the difference between VBA and the expression service. Going back to what Crystal showed earlier when she showed you the expression builder, when you have the expression builder available, it shows you on the left-hand side element which library you can use your own project. That's always available. You can use Access, you can use VBA, and you can use any library that you... Oh, sorry, I'm getting confused. I'm talking about VBA now. So in the expression builder, it will give you the items that you have. I believe it will also give you in there, it will give you any libraries that you have referenced as well. So if you were to add an extra reference in your tool's references, like for instance Excel, because you wanted to use a worksheet function, that would then become available to you in your expression builder. I was going to say that's where they differ. Don't really differ because it tries to be the same. I think I've covered everything there. Are you happy with that, Crystal? Is there anything I've missed out? I think I've followed your notes.
That's really good, Adrian, and perhaps we should give other people a chance to talk a little bit. Ben, you brought something up interesting in the chat. Let's see, where did that chat go?
He's talking about the rule of thumb, avoiding using NZ because of the difference in the performance. Is that the one you mean, Crystal?
Yeah. And that's a really good
that
point.
And Neil's question are really good ones to start with, Crystal.
Do you want to address those, Maria?
Related to what Adrian was just talking about with some of the differences between expressions and functions, Ben mentions that as a rule of thumb, he avoids using NZ, which is like the null zero in queries, and he uses instead IIF. And his reasoning is that IIF is supported by the JET database engine, and NZ is not. It makes a query out to Access to call the function, and in more complex queries, that can make a big difference in performance, or a difference in performance. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. And then as kind of a follow-up to that, Neil asked if there was a definitive list. For example, Crystal gave us this lovely HTML link for a lot of the functions. I'm sure it's not
That's the VBA library.
It's the VBA, just the VBA functions. It does not include the functions.
Well, it's not all
by
VBA
Access.
Functions. Like
well, I believe it is. Yeah, well, it's all the ones they have on their help. Although help is missing some things that actually are there.
Okay,
that pertains to a point I made earlier.
It's not okay. So that list, just for clarity, that list is VBA only.
That list is VBA only.
The VBA library, not everything that you could call
exactly.
VBA.
And all those things work in the other VBA products. That's why NZ doesn't work in Excel, because it's not there.
Got it.
It's in Access. It's a part of the Access
Got it. It's an
library.
access function. Okay, interesting. Crystal, you don't yet have a list of the expression functions then, and or a way to differentiate the two of them.
Well, I was working on the expression
Yep.
functions, but I didn't get them done in time, so I just
That's all
limited
right.
that to VBA.
That would be an awesome list to have someplace, though. I think Neil's right.
I have a database that I can show you that I use to generate that web page with, but I wasn't going to share it because I'm going to use it to generate information, and there's a lot of information left to fill out. But it's what I'm using to keep track of all this function information and where they work and examples. Well, I don't have to show it. I can do that another time. I'm just excited about it.
Love it when we build tools so that we can
Oh, yeah, I
do
know.
things, right?
Yeah, I do. I love it.
As long as you can reuse them.
I'm very interested in Ben and Neil were commenting about stuff, and they separated the expression service from the GetAge SQL engine. Now, I'm not absolutely convinced that they're different, but I'm ready to learn. Does anyone know what the situation is there?
There are some differences, I believe. For example, IIF is actually handled by the SQL engine of DAO itself, of the Jet engine itself. And it doesn't go to any external expression service. It basically works out for itself.
You're proving whether or not the expression service is external or not. So you can't say because it doesn't use the external expression service, therefore it must be external.
Then it doesn't use the same external one.
You're assuming it's external. I'm trying to find out whether it is. I think it might be part of the GetAge SQL engine.
I believe it is. Yes, that's what I mean. So IIF was an example, which is why it does lazy evaluation of the expressions, because it does it, as Crystal said, sensibly. Whereas if you use IIF through the VBA expression service by either evaluating it or using it in VBA itself, they evaluate both sides of the expression, which is why you get the div0 problem.
Not if you use Eval, it doesn't.
Oh, right.
That's only because VBA does it that way, because VBA is a programming language. Pretty much all programming languages, when it has a function or any sort of procedure to call, before it calls it, it evaluates the results of all its parameters. It goes off, runs those, shoves them on the stack. That's what it uses to communicate with the procedure. And while it's processing that, in VBA, the IIF in VBA, it will crash if you give it something to crash on. It's nothing to do with the IIF function, apart from the fact that the IIF function is about to be called, is attempting to be called. But if you use Eval and you put an IIF in the string that you're evaluating, it will treat it just like SQL and just like the expression service, because it is the expression service. Curious to know if that is within the GetAge engine or not. I think it might well be, actually. Ben says if IIF exists in at least two places, Jet and VBA, that's correct. It exists within the Jet/A/expression service on one hand. It exists in the VBA library. That is what is usually called when you're running IIF from VBA.
I don't believe that the GetAge system calls any external thing to evaluate IIF. I think it does it natively.
It does. I have no question, no doubt on that. It's a question of, is that entity called the expression service a part of GetAge, or is it external? I believe it's the former.
I believe that there are multiple expression services. VBA offers one, which is why where Jet goes to ask it to evaluate NZ, it doesn't do it itself. That's why it goes out.
It passes it to the expression service.
Right, okay.
This might be a good time to take a quick break and let Marcus tell us about what he's going to talk about at Colin's Access Europe group meeting, which is the same time as this presentation, I believe, but tomorrow being the 1st of October. Marcus, do you want to?
Yeah.
Where is Marcus?
Yeah.
Oh, there
Thank
he
you,
is.
Maria, for giving me the opportunity to speak. Yes, tomorrow at the same time, I will be presenting about my custom dialogues and mini notifications. So imagine this. You have been working on an Access database for months. The logic is perfect. The performance is right. The security is top-notch. You have a great design. Then you show it to your customer, and the first thing they see is a gray message box from the 90s. It's like presenting a new Porsche with speedo rims. Have you ever missed to format the text, add pictures, use tables in the message box? No problem. Tomorrow I will show you my dialog boxes. There are a message box, an input box, combo box, and the list box. And on top I have mini notification, which just gives a brief feedback to the user without disturb his workflow. It would be nice to welcome everybody tomorrow and share how custom dialogues can enhance your daily work. So see you tomorrow then.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question for those people that are left. What is your favorite function, if you have one?
Replace.
That's a good one.
I use it so heavily, I even have a multi-replace that I've designed. Instead of just giving one pair of replacement values, I can give unlimited set of replacement values. And it makes string building so much easier.
I tend to use date add and date diff quite a bit. Also format.
Interesting thing about format is it always converts what you're formatting to a string. But better than using the format function on your value is when you can use the format property of your control or your query column, because then your value is still a number, if it was a number to begin with.
That wasn't George clearing his throat for attention. That was just George. John's put a quick question in here. +1 on replace. I still do not know when to use switch over choose. Now, I don't use these very heavily, but I believe one of them gives the opportunity at each level to specify another check. Whereas the other one, I think choose, you work out a number at the first one and then a list of things to match the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, blah, blah, blah. If you've got something that fits that format, use choose. Otherwise, use switch.
Good explanation, Adrian.
You would normally code it differently if you're doing VBA in a lot of cases, but if you want to put something complicated like that in an expression, then switch and choose give you the opportunity to do that. They can be very powerful.
And also, I generally use a user-defined function before I will go use switch or choose. So I'll call my own code. Important to note that just like Adrian said with IIF and VBA evaluating every single possible answer before it evaluates the condition, the same thing happens with switch and choose.
So you're saying that switch and choose in the expression service are actually elements
Using
of the
VBA.
language? No, are actually elements of the language rather than function calls.
When you use switch or choose in a query, it's going out and using the VBA version of switch and choose because it doesn't have its own version. And in that case, all of the possible results are evaluated.
So you're just saying it's an ordinary function. It's not special syntax.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Ah,
Is that Crystal?
it did fit in there. So I just put a big long SQL statement in the chat where I'm using switch to determine a type from the MsysObjects table, whether it's a query or a form or a report or whatever it might be.
If anyone's interested in that, I strongly recommend that you copy it and paste it somewhere you can see it more easily.
I put it in my database and I just call it Q objects. Everything is in the SQL statement. So if I want information about my objects, I can just use that query instead of opening up MsysObjects and trying to figure out what those numbers mean.
Looks like Nautical Gent has just looked at it. His response.
Yeah, that kind of caught me flat-footed there.
Good Lord.
That's about how I said it to you.
I try.
Yeah, you got that southern accent down pretty good there. If you ever come to Virginia, I'll show you around.
I'd love that. That would be lovely.
Well, maybe this is a good time to mention that one of you did kind of PM me here and ask about being a presenter. I am always open to the idea of bringing more presenters in here. I know sometimes you hear from the same old, but that's because those are the people who actually volunteer to give presentations. Even if you don't think your topic necessarily can fill the full quote hour, and usually I try to tell people aim for 45 to 50 minutes and then a QA period at the end. If you think you have a 20-minute topic and I can slot you in with someone else with a 20-minute topic or whatever, we would love to have more presenters here. So yes, just let me know, either ping me in this meeting or I think you're able to reach me by email. I think you guys have my email. So reply to the Access Lunchtime. There's a separate email for Access Lunchtime itself, and I don't always check that very frequently, but I do check it periodically. So yeah, excellent presentation. And it's always good to know more about the ins and outs. A couple of us, I don't know if you noticed in the chat, we're chatting about how we learned something today. And I know that I am always amazed at, even after doing this for 25 years, I'm still learning from others. So it's good to learn those tidbits. Thank you very much to both of you, and great to see everybody. See you again perhaps tomorrow or at the latest next month at the end of October for Colin's presentation. Thanks again.
Thank you. And goodbye, everybody. Enjoy your day and future Access online user group meetings.
I'll see many of you tomorrow.
Ciao.
Bye. See you tomorrow.